What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz and Zach. I'm here with you. It's just me right now because Zach is having some technical difficulties. He's going to be on here shortly, hopefully, if his technology cooperates with him. But we're going to go over the Thursday night football preview between the Cardinals and the Saints tonight. We're also going to go over quarterback rankings, going to go over running back rankings. So we're going to get right into it. A couple guys who are back in practice. Jonathan Taylor back in practice. That's a great sign. I think he got a limited in. DeAndre Swift got a limited in as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown, great news there. He has a full practice. He had a full practice on Wednesday, so that's a great sign for him. Yeah, so I think that those are like the major ones right there. We thought, also Nyheim Hines, he's getting a limited practice in as well. So like if Jonathan Taylor were to miss again, I don't think he will. Nyheim Hines is probably going to be involved. Deon Jackson, by the way, that quad strain doesn't seem to be an issue, so I wouldn't worry about that. He practiced in full yesterday, but still, if Nyheim Hines is playing, I would expect him to eat into that workload if Jonathan Taylor were to play, or were to miss, actually. Now, I do want to talk about tonight's game. Give me one sec. All right, I'm back. Even I'm having technical difficulties over here. It's a Thursday. What are you going to do? Okay. Want to go with Thursday night's game. A lot of starters in tonight's game, right? You got Kyler Murray, you got DeAndre Hopkins, Eno Benjamin, assuming Connor is out, I would play Eno Benjamin like as a solid RB2. James Conner, like they're listing him as a game time decision. So I doubt that he plays. Keep an eye on that. Like, if Connor plays, I think he's like a low end RB2 for me, maybe. I won't assume that he gets all the work if he does play tonight. But yeah, like I said, I have Benjamin as a solid RB2 if Connor does miss. Zach Ertz, he's a solid start at tight end. Rondell Moore, solid PPR wide receiver 3 tonight. On the Saints side, you got Kamara. We'll get into Kamara a little bit later, but he's obviously in your lineup. We're going over the running back rankings, so I'll talk about Kamara in a bit. But he's obviously in your lineup, and he's been getting some serious work over the past 2 games specifically. Let's see. Who else? Andy Dalton. It looks like he's going to get the start. The Saints actually haven't named their starting quarterback, but Jameis Winston is not on the injury report. So keep that in mind. But beat reporters are saying that it's looking like it's going to be Andy Dalton, who, by the way, has a chance to win this job. So it is possible that happens. And if it does, like if you're in a Superflex league, 2 quarterback league, it's probably worth picking up Andy Dalton because once he gets his weapons back, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, he might be a pretty good QB2 for you, right? Keep that in mind. Now, let's see. Who else? Chris Olave, he's going to be in your lineup. He's a solid wide receiver 2 this week. He's out of the concussion protocol. Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry have already been ruled out, so he's going to get the targets. And this matchup isn't too bad. The Cardinals have been pretty good taking away number 1 wide receivers, but I think he could still get his. There's nobody on this team who shadows necessarily. They do move their corners around a bit, but no one corner really follows these wide receivers around, at least, so far this season. So that's what we got so far. Now, just real quick, I did want to show you guys. There were like a couple of, we haven't been doing great. We haven't been doing great on these pick'ems lately. On these underdog pick'ems over the past like 2 weeks. Hopefully you guys have more luck than I had. Like we were on a hot streak, right? Coming into like week 5, I think it was. And then week 5 and week 6, especially the Thursday night games have been brutal. I've been doing okay, a little bit more than 50% on these other, a little bit more than 50% on the Sunday slates. That's been fine for the most part. But there are a couple of reception props that I like in this game. Like for example, DeAndre Hopkins over 5.5. That one's okay. I'm not super into that one. But Rondell Moore over 5 receptions, I like. Zach Ertz over 5 receptions, I like. Those are the couple ones that I like. So maybe you can combine that with Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara's one is only at 4 receptions, so I do like that one as well. So those three are the main ones that I like in this game. Chris Olave, 62.5 receiving yards. I'm okay taking the over there. DeAndre Hopkins reception line. Let's see what that is at right now. That one's at 64.5 receiving yards. I like that one more, personally. Now, I'm having a little technical difficulties as well here. How are we looking? I'm trying to make. What just happened, Mike? Did you were you able to hear, Mike? I'm gonna bring you on here, dude. Mike, can you get on here, dude? What's up, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you hear anything I just said over the past like 3 minutes? Like
I got kicked out for about a minute, and then I came back in, and you were talking. So I think you should be good, and hopefully the listeners, got everything. Okay. But yeah, and then you jumped out. Who knows?
All right, everybody say hi to Mike. Hi, Mike. All right, Mike. I'm gonna kick you out. All right, so yeah, Mike, you might have to put those overlays back up because it looks like that they got removed. But anyway, okay, I'm good, Zach. Okay, good. I'm glad you guys are you guys can hear me, because for me it was all frozen. All right, sorry about that. But I like Hopkins receiving over the 64.5 yards. But anyway, if you use code Upper Hand, like it says on the screen here, you will double your first deposit on Underdog up to $100. Make sure you take advantage of that promo code Upper Hand. Make sure you go ahead and use that tonight for tonight's game. Okay, moving forward. Let's see. We got these quarterback rankings up here. Lamar Jackson, I have him here at number 1, despite him having 3 down weeks. When you spoke, Zach actually spoke about Lamar Jackson. Zach, are you good? Zach, looks like Zach's back. Zach is good. Yeah, Zach is back, baby. Let's go. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. Zach, I hear you. You're looking good, sounding good. That's what I'm talking about. Even I had technical difficulties. Mike got kicked out the stream. Something's going on today with StreamYard. I don't know what it is.
Something about it.
Anyway, listen, I
just
appreciate
in time. Sounds like I hear Lamar.
Just in time. I talked about Thursday Night Football. You missed all the Underdog stuff, but that's fine. That's cool. Yeah, and I appreciate everybody being patient with us. While we get going. Okay, so Zach, I was just saying that you spoke about Lamar Jackson yesterday, right? Maybe inquiring on Lamar Jackson a bit to see what's up, right? Because he had those 3 down weeks. I still have him ranked here at number 1. Rashad Bateman returned to practice on Wednesday. Good sign for him to return this week. Jalen Hurts is on a bye, right? So there's no other quarterback that is in this tier as of right now.
Right, I think that's completely fair. And you're right. I was talking about, sending a heat check. I personally wouldn't, expect him to be on the block. I think people understand his upside, but I think a heat check is warranted with the way he's been playing the past 3 weeks. You mentioned that he is a QB1 through the first 3 weeks, and then the last 3 weeks, he is still a fantasy QB1, but he's on the border. He's a QB12. So I like Lamar definitely in his matchup against Cleveland. Cleveland has been a shoddy defense at best this season so far. I think this would be a nice spot for Lamar to get back on track. If the trend continues, if this is truly a trend, it's a 3-game by 3-game system that we're working with, he should be good again this week. That has nothing to do with any type of stats, but that's the way it's been trending. It looks like I think Lamar has a good chance to get back on track. I think he's the number 1 quarterback this week.
Yeah, I got Patrick Mahomes at number 2. The 49ers are already out Emmanuel Mosley for the year, right? Charvarius Ward has a groin injury. I don't think he's going to play. Jimmy Ward might play, but then he has that club on his hand, right? Because he has a broken hand. And they'll likely get Nick Bosa back. He did practice yesterday, so that's a good sign for him. Keep an eye on that. He can still miss, but he's back at practice, probably playing this week. I think this is going to be a relatively high scoring game. And I think Mahomes is going to be able to do his thing. 49ers defense is good, but they're just missing some key pieces. And I think Mahomes is going to be able to take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. We just saw the Falcons tear apart the Niners defense, which was one of the bigger surprises to me. I know they're banged up, but that was just like that kind of caught me off guard. So if Patrick Mahomes going in, and they've been playing really well. They lost to the Bills obviously last week, but who isn't going to lose to the Bills? Who isn't liable to lose to the Bills? I don't hold that against them. Good spot for Patrick Mahomes to just keep doing what he's been doing. I wouldn't be surprised if he's throwing more if it's another multi-touchdown game for Travis Kelce through the year, because that he's been Mahomes' favorite target, and I think that San Francisco's going through some things right now with the injuries. They're going through it, so I think Patrick Mahomes is good number 2.
100%. I got Justin Herbert at 3. The highest I've had him this year. The Chargers had the highest implied total for the week this week. He gets Keenan Allen back, and the Seahawks can potentially put up some points on them too. So I think Herbert is set up this week pretty nicely.
Yeah, I like this one to kind of be a shootout. I know we talk about any Seahawks game being a shootout now. We kind of didn't get that last week with Arizona, who I thought could actually take advantage of Seahawks defense. It really didn't. But I think Justin Herbert's going to make him pay a little bit more than Kyler Murray did. I think Herbert's a better arm talent, and Keenan Allen's coming back. The offense should be back to firing on all cylinders. I like Justin Herbert at 3. I think this would be the time where he can capture that upside. He can return to that form that we're expecting him to be at heading into the season.
I think so. Keenan Allen coming back, good matchup. I think it can happen. I got Joe Burrow at 4. Atlanta's given up the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Every quarterback besides Jacoby Brissett has gone over 19 fantasy points in regular, 4-point touchdown passing scoring against them this year. So, I think he should have a good day. He should also have his weapons at, more kind of full strength this week. T. Higgins actually practiced on a Wednesday, which is a great sign. He hasn't practiced on a Wednesday for several weeks now. So it looks like he's feeling better as far as that ankle goes.
Yeah, I like Joe Burrow here at 4. I'm looking at all these matchups now. It's like this could be a really good week for fantasy quarterbacks.
It could be a high scoring week. Yeah.
I think so. But with Joe Burrow, I do like Joe Burrow now here too, because like you said, that nobody scored less than 19 points besides Jacoby Brissett. And Joe Burrow has been quietly getting it done the whole season. He's actually been a very solid fantasy quarterback, and we saw the upside that we liked, last week with Jamar Chase kind of coming back out and showing us what he can do, So I think this is another good spot for the Bengals and Joe Burrow overall. Atlanta's been a quietly good offense too, so there might be some fireworks in this one. I wouldn't put it past Atlanta, because they're actually decent in the ground game, and their offensive line, like we said, is much better. So this matchup didn't look very good on paper coming into the season, but they've actually kind of trended towards the mean in both directions. The Bengals are a little bit up until last week, they were trending down a little bit, and the Falcons were trending up. I think this is actually a quality matchup. I didn't think it was going to be heading into the season.
I'm with you, man, and I expect this to be a high-scoring game.
Yeah.
I have Dak Prescott at 6, your boy. He's making his return this week, and he's doing it against the Detroit defense, giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. He has CD, he has Gallup, and the offense, I think, should receive a little bit of a lift in his return.
I think so, absolutely. This is the matchup you want coming off of an injury, against Detroit. Detroit is coming off the bye week, so they might have made a couple adjustments. They might not look like the bad scoring defense that they've been all season, but, there's a chance that could be the case. I do like Dak Prescott in this offense. It seems like the offense does better, obviously, when Dak Prescott plays. And I was pretty high on Dak Prescott coming into the season because he was a good fantasy quarterback last season, but he didn't look very good in the 3 quarters, I think, that he played in week 1. So my biggest thing I'm looking for this week from Dak would be to see, is this the same offense as what came out in week 1, or is it going to be looking like last year's? If it looks anything like last year's, I think Dak could easily outperform his ranking at 6 right now.
Yeah, for sure. I have Geno at 7 against the Chargers. This game has a 51-point over-under, according to Vegas, and according to our data analytics-driven partner and sponsor of today's podcast, Preciser, they have this game at a 53-point total, and they have the Seahawks with an implied total of 24 points. And just want to kind of explain what Preciser is. Thank you for sponsoring this video. They are a data analytics and algorithm-driven sports prediction platform that helps give you an edge in DFS, fantasy sports betting. So I'd recommend checking them out. They do have a free package that you can check out. They have some stats available for you, some predictions available for you. But right now, you can get their pro package that offers all their data for 30% off the first 3 months if you use the code Upper Hand. That moves that pro package to only $6.99 a month. From their usual $9.99 a month. So pretty affordable, right? Their website is preciser.io, and that's code Upper Hand. I'll have the link in the description for both the podcast and on YouTube. Anything else to say about Geno?
I like Geno Smith in this matchup. He had a quiet outing last week, but that game was just weird overall. We thought it was going to be high scoring. It wasn't. So don't panic on Geno Smith. It's weird still saying that, trust Geno Smith. I think we can, though. This week, if he puts up a good performance, I think we're set. You can lock him in your lineup pretty safely every week.
Yeah, we have Tom Brady at number 8. The Bucs have passed the ball more than any other team over the last 3 weeks. The volume is there. He has the weapons. Mike Evans, had a little bit of a down week last week, but I expect him to kind of bounce back this week against Carolina. He has the weapons, to be in the top 10 every single week. So hopefully he can bounce back after what was a little bit of a disappointment last week against the banged up Steelers defense.
Yeah, that was one of the shocking developments of the weekend last week because we kind of had the Buccaneers offense as a whole, not just Tom Brady, but Mike Evans, Chris Godwin as, high-end plays against the Steelers because we saw how banged up the Steelers defense was. It looks like maybe Tom Brady is starting to have age catch up a little bit to him. I don't want to trigger anybody by saying that, but maybe it's age, maybe it's a controversy going on, but the Bucs offense doesn't look the same. The only one that I'm happy, with the way they've been producing so far this season is Leonard Fournette. I'm still waiting to see the passing offense get going. This is a good spot to do it. I mean, it's Carolina. They're a pretty easy outing, I think. Could be a trap game for the Bucs, but I think that the Buccaneers should have no problem handling Carolina. This could be a good game. Again, if you don't do well against a banged up Pittsburgh defense, let's just go against Carolina and beat them. Take out your anger from last week on Carolina. I can see it happening.
I hope so, man. I mean, Carolina's defense is a little underrated, and they just switched their head coach, and they got some stuff to prove. But yeah, I agree. I think Tom Brady, can hopefully will be able to bounce back in this game. Right. But Tua, having him at number 9, he's going up against the Steelers at home. I think he's going to have a better game than Tom Brady did last week. Credit to them, right? They were banged up, but Teddy Bridgewater just threw for 329 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. And it's really all about these weapons, right? And Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So you got to assume Tua is able to get it done this week. And, Pittsburgh has been giving up the second most passing yards this year. So, they had a decent week last week. And Tom Brady did throw for his yards. But I think the Dolphins can take advantage of the Steelers defense, especially through the air.
Yeah, it's a pass-first offense, and it seems like that's the way it's going to be all season, regardless of who's at quarterback. Even when Skylar Thompson was in, it seems like the Dolphins were intent to throw the ball. And that's where their weapons are, so I don't blame them. So Tua, as long as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are playing, I think they can make any quarterback fantasy relevant. The deep ball is what makes, the quarterback very dangerous. We've seen Tua do that a little bit this season, but he's also missed on a couple. I like Tua this week against Pittsburgh. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, they're just too good. Anybody with them as their receivers, you can't not rank, I don't think, inside the top 10 because they're just that good. Dare I say Tyreek Hill looks better in Miami than he did in Kansas City. In Kansas City, he was great, but it seems like he's just a little bit more consistent as a fantasy receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting the ball thrown to him all over the field, right? Yeah. Like intermediate, short, deep. You know what I'm saying? Like compared to Kansas City, where it was a lot of like either at the line of scrimmage or deep.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it felt.
It's the Mike McDaniel effect.
Yeah, man, he's doing his thing.
Yeah,
Derek Carr at 10 against Houston. I have Jimmy G against Kansas City at home at number 11 this week. A little high for Jimmy, but I'm not sure if I've ever had him ranked as a QB1 before. His weapons, though his weapons are healthy. The Chiefs are going to put up points against their banged up defense, and they're going to throw the ball more than they like. I think it'll be similar to what we saw last week against the Falcons. And the Chiefs are already giving up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I'm in on Jimmy this week.
Yeah, I like Jimmy Garoppolo at 11. It might be a little high. This might be a ranking at his close to his ceiling. I don't think he has top 5 potential, but he's a very good play, I think, this week, like you said, with the Chiefs likely to go up. I mean, the Chiefs dominated the Buccaneers defense, and now they're playing against a banged up 49ers defense that just allowed a bunch of points to Atlanta. I think that the game script is going to be, like you said, negative for Jimmy Garoppolo. And Jimmy Garoppolo can throw. A lot of people don't think that he's really a good quarterback, someone that can play and win games like that. But I think from behind, he can do plenty. He'll be just fine throwing. He has Brandon Ayuk, he has Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle showed up, last week. So he has his full complement of weapons, like you said. 11 makes sense to me.
All these guys had 10 plus targets last week, and I think something similar is going to happen this week against the Chiefs.
Right.
Let's see. Matt Ryan at 12 here. He's been passing the ball a lot lately. Marcus Mariota at 13. He's had a pretty high floor every single game this year, outside of just one, and that was the one where I thought that he was a really good start. But every single game he's been getting it done for you. Aaron Rodgers at 14, followed by Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Jared Goff against a tough Dallas defense. I think that's why I have him kind of low here. Usually he would hover around low in QB1, high in QB2, but I just think, even though they are coming off a bye, Dallas has been really good against opposing quarterbacks. So I'm not optimistic about Jared Goff this week. Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson close it out at 20. And you can tell that, there are some solid quarterbacks on bye this week based on how this top 20 ended here.
But the funny part is, with the quarterbacks on bye, Russell Wilson's still at 20. That's one of the things that kind of opened my eyes. It's like, wow. And I'm not saying I disagree, but just the Broncos off. We could talk about that forever. I can't stand the Broncos offense. They're just really bad. But
would you put him over any of these other guys that I have? Daniel Jones, Brissett, Goff, Tannehill?
I'd put him over Daniel Jones.
Okay.
It might be because I'm a Cowboys fan, but I'm a Daniel Jones hater. He is not good. The passing offense is not consistent.
He runs the ball. He runs the ball.
Yes, he runs the ball. So Justin Fields runs the ball. Right?
That's true.
So Daniel Jones, I'd argue that Justin Fields looks a little bit better than Daniel Jones. I don't like Daniel Jones that much. I don't think Daniel Jones offers much in the passing game, and you could just look at the passing numbers. There's not much there. The offense runs through Saquon. Daniel Jones is just a figurehead at this point. He can get it done for you, I guess, in a pinch. But I think 16 is a little high for Daniel Jones because the Jaguars' defense isn't that bad. I mean, it's not. If you're going to blame somebody in Jacksonville for why they haven't been playing very well recently, I think it's Trevor Lawrence. Like I said, I think it sits on the offensive side of the ball more than the defensive side of the ball. Defense is doing their part enough, at least, that they can win games. It's not like atrocious.
And that's part of the reason why I had him ranked so high. I thought he could potentially get it done against Jacksonville. They run more plays. Justin Fields is going up against the Patriots this week. Like, that's why I don't have him in the top 20. I think it's a really tough matchup for him. They don't run enough plays. It's just not conducive to fantasy points unless he scores a touchdown. If he ends up, if they do end up running more plays, then yeah, sure. Like, I can see him still getting it done, but tough matchup. I just, I don't trust him at all. Last week they ran a lot more plays than we thought that he would. On what was that, Thursday night?
Yes, it was Thursday night against Washington.
Yes. So, and that was a really tough, really easy matchup for him too. Right. I don't know. I can see him. I can see playing him over guys like Russell Wilson. Maybe I'll put Jacoby Brissett over Daniel Jones.
That's maybe what I would do.
Yeah,
it's probably gonna be a higher scoring game, between Baltimore and Cleveland. I think Jared Goff's in a good spot. I'm just looking at the rankings. Daniel Jones, yeah. I'm not saying I would start Justin Fields over Daniel Jones this week just because, like you said, New England. But I'm just saying, like, if you want to talk about fantasy relevance, I'd say on a weekly basis, you're looking more at Justin Fields than Daniel Jones.
I agree. I think I had, if I'm not mistaken, I had Justin Fields ranked above Daniel Jones every single week.
I think that was the case. Yeah. Well, Daniel Jones, I don't think he's appeared on these rankings yet this season up until now. That's true.
You could tell how many quarterbacks are on bye this week.
Yeah. No, it's tough sledding.
All right, let's move on to running backs. I have Ekeler at 1. He's now number 1 in weighted opportunity among running backs this year. He's been peppered in the pass game, especially lately, and he's been producing. Rough efficiency last week, but he's getting it done. One can argue Keenan Allen will be back, so maybe take away some targets from Ekeler. But I think number 1, like, you can take a bit away from guys like Mike Williams. Josh Palmer had 12 targets last week, and Ekeler still got his, right? So I think all that is going away for Josh Palmer. Seattle's a great matchup as well for running backs. So I think Ekeler has to be number 1 this week.
Yeah, I think he's earned it. You talk about Saquon's been good. Like, we have him at 2, obviously. So he's been good. But Austin Ekeler has been great and reminiscent of the Austin Ekeler that we saw last season, these past 3 weeks. And I think you can keep riding that momentum because it seems like the Chargers offense is out of the funk. It seems like they're doing what they need to do, and it's running through Austin Ekeler right now. That's maybe not good for Justin Herbert, who we talked about earlier, but Austin Eckler's getting it done. I wouldn't bet against him against the Seattle defense. They haven't been very good at all. So I like Austin Ekeler as one. A lot of people might just be tempted to start with Saquon and Christian McCaffrey as 1 too, because they're both doing their thing too. But I like Austin Ekeler at 1 this week.
Yeah, and I do like the matchup a lot better than Saquon or McCaffrey. But we have Saquon at 2 against Jacksonville. CMC at 3, tough matchup, but he's averaging like 20 fantasy points per game in tough matchups this year. So it doesn't really matter. He's going to get his targets regardless.
Yeah,
I had Josh Jacobs at 4, and this might be kind of crazy.
I don't think it is.
You don't think it is? Okay, good. Okay, but 2 things, right? Like, 1 is his weighted opportunity was higher than any other running back in the 2 weeks before his bye. 5 receptions in 3 straight games on top of his workload on the ground. And he's going up against Houston, who's given up 5 yards a carry and the most fantasy points per game to running backs.
Yeah, I think
this is this week.
What did you say before this week?
He's at number 4 this week.
I
said before.
I think 100%. I think he deserves to be this high. And you look, it's Houston, and the role that he's had. We talked about this a little bit. Was it yesterday or the day before? That Josh Jacobs, this is a role he's never had before, but he's absolutely thriving in it right now. Hopefully the bye week doesn't, kill any momentum that he had or change any of the offensive game plan for the Raiders. But I think that he should come out and continue to do well. This is a really nice matchup for him. He looks really good too. Like, we haven't seen him unleash the way they've unleashed him. And it seems like every time he gets the ball, he's plowing someone over for like 5 or 6 yards a carry. Like, he's just looks so good out of nowhere. And I just keep talking about, this is the guy they dropped his 5th-year option. I don't understand why. Maybe they're just trying to get as much as they can out of him now for cheap. They don't want any long-term liability for him, so they're just going to run it out and milk as much value as they can out of him. But as long as they keep doing that, he's going to be, really good fantasy start at running back. I didn't expect him to be at 4 in week 7, but that's just how it's going right now. So
for sure, man. Leonard Fournette's at 5. The past 2 weeks have been amazing in terms of opportunity. 7 catches, 10 catches, 6 catches each of the last 3 weeks. And I expect that to continue this week.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. Like I said, the one constant through, the ups and downs for the Buccaneers has been Leonard Fournette, and there's no reason to expect that not to continue. Against the Panthers, the Panthers defense, like you said, I guess it is a little underrated. They weren't bad, and they kept Carolina in the game for most of the game last week against Los Angeles. But Leonard Fournette's an easy start for me. He's been one of my favorite running backs because of his usage, and there's no reason to think that he's not going to continue to get that.
I got Nick Chubb at 6. He should bounce back this week against Baltimore. They've been giving up 4.6 yards per carry this year on the low. So not really worried about this matchup a ton. I think they'll be able to move the ball. I think Amari Cooper will have a plus matchup as well. I think there's going to be a lot of man coverage played in this game. And I think that's when Amari Cooper, is going to shine, especially short to intermediate and all that. So, they were able to kind of handle Jamar Chase for the most part because a lot of his routes are going deep, and they play those 2 high safeties. But I don't really think that's something you have to worry about for Amari Cooper. So I think this offense is going to be able to move, and I have a good feeling that Nick Chubb is going to find his way into the end zone this week.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any reason to be worried about Nick Chubb. I think this might be a little bit low. I'm not sure. I might put...
Who would you put him over?
It's tough now that I'm looking at it, And the only person maybe I would consider putting him over would be Leonard Fournette at this point, but I think Leonard Fournette's usage is good. Maybe I jumped the gun on that one. 6 just seems low for Nick Chubb.
It seems low.
He's been.
I know. It's because we haven't had Josh Jacobs ahead of him at all. We haven't had Fournette ahead of him at all, right? So usually Nick Chubb is in the top 5. When he was killing it over the first 3 weeks, we had him at like 1.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was just unstoppable.
And those first few weeks, Austin Ekeler wasn't really doing his thing. So maybe that's why 6 just seems, I think it's not so much Nick Chubb maybe as it is the other guys ahead of him just doing really well. But also you look at, he had a rough week last week against New England. Don't expect him to just have 12 carries, each week. He's going to have more carries than that every week. It was just a terrible game for the Browns overall. They ran like 0 plays. They kept turning the ball over, and it was just bad. So don't pay any attention to that. Really, just wipe that from your memory. Move forward with the same Nick Chubb that you had before that matchup. You're plenty fine. I think he has RB1 overall potential, even though he's ranked at 6.
Yeah. Derrick Henry's back this week from his bye. He's been getting it done for you. 4 out of 5 games with 20 plus carries, 4 out of 5 games with at least 1 touchdown, and he's had at least 30 yards receiving in his last 3 games. So something worth noting there that he's a little bit more involved in the pass game too.
Yeah, that's a new role. Who would have thought that he'd be having 30 yards receiving 3 games in a row? I didn't think that was going to happen, but it looks like he's back to the usage that he got when we were calling him, the overall RB1 maybe, behind, he was in the mix behind Christian McCaffrey, but I like Derrick Henry move forward. He hasn't shown me any reason not to. He has a pretty good schedule. It's pretty cushy against Indianapolis, Houston, and Kansas City coming up. I like him. I think his ceiling is kind of a little bit lower than what we're used to, and that's okay. He's a solid running RB1 for you. He's no longer, I think, a high-end RB1. I think he's a solid RB1 at this point.
Ramondre Stevenson got all the work in Dameon Harris's absence last week. Continue to start him as a solid RB1, assuming Harris is out again. If Harris is out again, I would assume that he still gets limited practices all week. But just keep an eye on that a little bit. Stevenson, we talked about him yesterday in our buy sell podcast. We recommended, just see what you can get for him if you can get a season long asset. I have Ramondre Stevenson in a couple leagues. I shot some trades out there just to see if I can get some high end assets. We'll see what happens. I'll let you guys know tomorrow if anybody accepted them. But Ramondre Stevenson's a solid start this week. Alvin Kamara, he's been getting a really solid workload lately. Last 2 games, 23 for 103 on the ground, 6 for 91 through the air, and then 19 for 99 on the ground, and then 9 targets last week. He should be able to get some work tonight and produce.
Yeah, the usage seems to be back for Alvin Kamara. He's done his thing, the past 2 weeks. I just want to see how that continues. I think it's going to continue, but I'd still pump the brakes a little bit on him. I think the Saints offense is still dragging its feet a little bit with where it needs to be. I think the touchdown upside's a little bit low. Although this is a decent matchup against the Cardinals. They've been having a hard time all season, and it should be hopefully a better matchup than we had on Thursday Night Football. So maybe some more scoring, maybe more than 2 touchdowns across the past 2 weeks. Hopefully they can meet that quota a little bit. But I think Alvin Kamara is a good start anyway. The way he's been doing, momentum is on his side, so there's no reason not to start. He has, he'll be able to get it done for you.
There are a lot of fantasy relevant players in tonight's game.
Oh yeah,
a ton.
I missed the review.
Oh yeah. Basically, I said let's start everybody.
Yeah.
Joe Mixon at number 10 against Atlanta. Good overall matchup for Cincinnati. Should be a lot of scoring in that game. Preciser has the Bengals scoring 30 points in this game. One of the highest scoring offenses this week, and they have Mixon with a 52.9% chance of scoring a touchdown. That's super
pretty good.
Precise. So that's a pretty good percentage right there. Pretty good odds to score against Atlanta.
It's better than flipping a coin, right?
Better than flipping a coin.
Yeah, so
he has a good shot. I mean, regression is going to hit Mixon as well because he only scored, I think, 2 touchdowns this year with all that work that he's had. So those touchdowns are coming. We got Kenneth Walker here at number 11 against one of the worst rushing defenses in the league in the Chargers. Kenneth Walker is a guy that, before this game, I want to buy him if I can. He could go off. He had a decent week last week, but he showed that ability, that special ability. And if I can buy Kenneth Walker right now, I will try to do that. But meanwhile, start him as a low-end RB1. And look, I have him over Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, no, I think that's warranted. The way Jonathan Taylor's been playing, he's coming off the injury. He's been out a couple of weeks. And the Colts offense just overall, suddenly they found an identity in the passing game without Jonathan Taylor. So I'm not sure if that's going to necessarily be the case with Jonathan Taylor back in the lineup. Maybe they'll go back to running the ball more, but I think Kenneth Walker's a safer start just because, the workload I think is going to be there. You said the Seahawks are suddenly a fast offense, and the matchup I like just a little bit more for Kenneth Walker.
I'm with you. I do want to see a better, a good game put together by JT and then him looking healthy before I move him up. But, still have him as a low-end RB2 here. I'm sorry, low-end RB1 at 12.
Mm-hmm.
Brees Hall at 13. Tougher overall matchup for the Jets this week. Denver's offense has been looking terrible, but their defense has held it together this year. They have been a little bit, sneaky leaky against the run this year.
Yeah.
So, Brees Hall can get it done for you. You still have him as a high-end RB2 here, borderline RB1. So continue to start him. We got Dameon Pierce at 14 against Vegas. He was already getting the work, right? We noticed that, they're giving him the Derrick Henry treatment in terms of like they don't abandon the run when they get down. And that's great news for Pierce. And now Lovie Smith, I think it was yesterday or the day before, confirming exactly that he wants him to get 20 carries a game, despite, them potentially not being in games. So that sounds about right. And that sounds kind of like what they've been doing.
That sounds like awesome news for Dameon Pierce. If the workload he's been getting isn't up to the standard that Lovie Smith wants, then, maybe we're in for even better of a surprise with Dameon Pierce. I mean, you had him, you don't want to call it a surprise. I know you had him pretty high. And you said that I think I can quote you on this. You said that if anyone's going to earn that early down, that 3-down role first, it's going to be Dameon Pierce. I think that you said that. So, props to you on that one. You don't want to call it a surprise because you might have seen this coming, but it looks like he is, the best weapon on Houston's offense, and they're just going to keep giving it to him. They're not they're shameless about it. They're just going to give it to him. There's no reason not to get the ball to him. I like Dameon Pierce. If you picked him up late in drafts like I did, you're extremely happy. I hit on him as one of my 0 RB targets, so that's great to see. But going back to Brees Hall, just one thing, also Ekeler was able to get it done last week, even though the Broncos defense was pretty good. The weird thing about the Broncos defense is that, or the Broncos overall, it seems it doesn't matter who they play, the Broncos just bring them down to mid-level. Regardless of who the opponent is, or they get brought up to mid-level, wherever they're at, they just get down to the Broncos level, and it's always a close game, and it's always a heartbreak for the Broncos at the end. So maybe your Jets are in for another win, but I think Brees Hall is going to be fine, even though Denver is a tougher matchup.
5-2, baby, 5-2. No,
right on the horizon.
I'm with you. But Ekeler, he got the work at the pass game, but Brees Hall only saw 2 targets each of the past 2 weeks. And he hasn't been as involved in the pass game as he was with Joe Flacco. So, that's one thing to consider. He did end up getting 100 receiving yards, on only 2 targets in Zach Wilson's first game back this year. But, something to keep an eye on. Ekeler got a shit ton of targets in the pass game, and that's really what kept him afloat. But he was pretty inefficient last week in both the run and the pass game. I thought he was going to go over his rushing totals just because Denver has been a little bit vulnerable in the run game. So hopefully we see some of that with Brees Hall if you're starting him this week.
And Brees Hall has had his 2 best fantasy performances this season with Zach Wilson. So that's encouraging. Even though he's not getting that passing work.
They've actually kind of turned into a run-heavy offense.
Right.
With Joe Flacco, they were extremely pass-heavy. And then when Zach Wilson came in, I guess it makes sense, they went extremely run-heavy. And over the past 3 weeks, Brees Hall is right around 20 carries a game, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
DeAndre Swift at 15. He got a limited practice in on Wednesday. He'll likely start moving up the rankings, right? Once we see he's getting his full workload, this will likely be the lowest he's ever ranked as long as he's healthy. Yeah. But he got a limited practice in on Wednesday. We'll see where he's at. And, once I see that, okay, cool, he's back to his normal workload this week, then I'll probably move him up to a solid RB2, RB1, low end RB1, something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if his workload ends up looking like it did, after that first injury where he still played before the shoulder injury kind of compounded the issue and then held him out. We saw a lot of DeAndre Swift, a lot of Jamal Williams, and some Craig Reynolds all in the same game. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a role, what it looks like. The only thing that you have working against that is that Dallas's defense, if there's one problem with it, is they've been pretty bad against the run. I mean, the Eagles gashed them last week. That was the reason that they really stayed out of the game, because the Eagles were able to run the ball so well against Dallas's defense. And we know that DeAndre Swift has ripped off a bunch of big runs already, this season. So I think that you have different forces working against them. I think that 15 is a spot where you're comfortable. this is where you expect him to kind of finish. But I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes a little higher or a little lower. But I think low end RB1 is his ceiling this week.
Aaron Jones at 16. I have Eno Benjamin at 17. Aaron Jones, man, like, it's been a little bit disappointing, over the past few games. He had that big boom week. What are you doing with Aaron Jones right now? Like, are you just starting him every single week? You're holding him? Are you looking to move him? What are you doing with him right now?
I think it's hard to move him at this point, and I think that you have to hold him. We know what he can do. It's just now it's not, it's not like the Packers offense is doing very well. They're not doing very well. It's not like AJ Dillon is taking his work and he's not producing. It's just nobody's doing well in Green Bay right now. So I think you have to hold at this point. There's no selling point for Aaron Jones because AJ Dillon is still there. And now both of them are underperforming. And the Packers offense doesn't look good to boot. So I think you have to hold. It's going to be hard to sell. I wouldn't get rid of him. I wouldn't bench him. I think I'd start him at flex ideally, but he can work as an RB2, but he's definitely not the RB1 that people were hoping that he would be. Especially, we saw a bunch of numbers floating around in the offseason that Aaron Jones, he's RB1 when Devontae Adams doesn't play. He averages 20-some points a game. That hasn't been the case. The offense looks completely different. If you have Aaron Jones, you have to hold.
You got to hold him. I agree.
There's no choice.
And start him. The offense just isn't as good, as it was.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why, and Aaron Rodgers isn't throwing the ball as much, and he's not getting the targets either. So that's what you want. Like, once his target share starts going up a little bit, that's really what you want, and hopefully they can figure that out. Yeah. I got Eno Benjamin here at 17 for tonight. His workload was crazy this past week, it was crazy, because we don't see that. He had 87% of snaps. He ran a route on 90% of dropbacks. For a running back, running backs don't do that. Running backs don't stay on the field and run a route on 90% of dropbacks, especially on an offense that runs so many plays and so many pass plays. Okay? That's insane. He should have had 12 targets in this game based on that number. Okay? So
that would have been great.
It would have been great.
Yeah.
And if he has that same type of workload tonight, he can get close to that number.
Yeah.
Okay. So start Eno Benjamin tonight. I know it didn't work out as you wanted to last week when you picked him up with James Conner out. You thought it was a smash start. It was a smash start. It was a smash decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The decision and the process was correct. Continue to roll with that process and start Eno Benjamin this week against New Orleans. New Orleans, on the low, like, they've been giving up some production on the run game. This is not the same New Orleans front that has been stopping the run every single week to like elite running backs. Now they've been gashed a little bit. So I'm okay starting Eno Benjamin this week as a solid RB2.
Yep, that about covers what I was gonna say. I like Benjamin this week too. I think he's gonna do better than 9 points, against what he had in Seattle. I think that's gonna be much better tonight. So, hopefully we're right in that prediction. He should be able to do better this week.
He's a game time decision. Okay, that's what they're labeling him as. I doubt he plays. Just keep an eye on that, though, right? Something to just make sure that it might be. I'm still going to play Eno as like a flex play, high upside flex play if Conner ends up playing, and then Conner would be like a low end RB2 flex play also, because I don't expect him to get the full workload. It kind of ruins each other's value a little bit, but I would assume he doesn't play. But keep an eye on it anyway. Travis Etienne against the Giants. I have him at number 18 here. The Giants have given up 5.5 yards per carry this season. That's only behind the Chargers. So I kind of like Etienne to potentially have some big plays in this one. Maybe this is finally his coming out party. Hopefully.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And, you mentioned the running game that the Giants haven't been very stout against them, which that might open up lanes for James Robinson. It just comes down to the way that they're going to be playing. I think at this point, I would love to see Travis Etienne get the ball more. Like I said last week, we saw every time he touched the ball, he was like averaging like 8 or 9 yards a touch. It felt like it seemed like he was always going for a big game, and he didn't get the ball enough. I think that the key to the Jacksonville offense, like I said, rests with Trevor Lawrence. But once Trevor Lawrence gets back to serviceable, you got to get the ball to Travis Etienne more, make the offense a little bit more explosive. James Robinson's good, but those first 3 weeks look like they're kind of in the past. It looks like James Robinson come back down to earth. Travis Etienne should be getting more snaps any week now. Travis Etienne's going to have that explosion game. It might not seem like it might not seem like it'll be this week against the Giants, who have been surprisingly good, but it very well could be. I think that 18 is conservative with his ranking.
Raheem Mostert at 19. He's still the guy in the backfield. At 20, we have Jeff Wilson. Tevin Coleman is unfortunately eating into his workload a bit, but there will be scoring in this game. So like I'm good having Jeff Wilson in my lineup, but just keep in mind that he could end up with like 12 carries, right? The hope is that he has 15 plus and a touchdown. That's kind of what you're hoping for.
Yeah, it could be, like we said, a pass happy game with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing the ball. With Jeff Wilson, I'm not sure what his workload is going to look like in this matchup. I'm not sure I like Jeff Wilson. I might actually have him a little bit lower than 20. I forget if we have below him.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
Let's look at 21 through 30. I have Zeke at 21 against a bad Detroit run defense.
Right.
I have David Montgomery at 22.
I'd put Zeke over Jeff Wilson.
Okay,
I know that. And
those two were actually two that I was kind of in between. Like I was kind of going back and forth between these two because of the fact that Zeke has a good matchup.
Zeke has a good matchup, and he looked a little bit better, last week. He wasn't running bad. He was actually running pretty hard. With Dak back, the offense should be a little bit better. Maybe that gives him a little bit more motivation too. But I think, he's actually looking like he's, even with Tony Pollard there getting touches, it seems like they're still getting the ball to Zeke at a pretty good rate. I think their workloads are very similar. I think this matchup this week is what sells it for me to put Zeke over Jeff Wilson.
Okay. David Montgomery, I have him at 22. Matt Eberflus talking about a potential hot hand situation here between Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. We kind of saw this coming, but still okay starting Montgomery for now until we see a real division in work, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that and him saying that, is this still an appropriate ranking for you at 22?
I think it is. We've seen David Montgomery get it done. He's still going to be a part of the offense because as long as Justin Fields is struggling to throw the ball, they're going to have to hand the ball off a lot. And Khalil Herbert, he's still behind David Montgomery at this point. I don't think the hot hand approach is going to lead them to go completely away from one or the other. David Montgomery is going to start. He's always going to get the first crack at being the hot hand, I think, in the game. So I like him to do better than not well, if that makes sense. I like him. It doesn't. I like him to do good enough to be the hot hand in the backfield more than I like Khalil Herbert week in and week out.
I agree with you on that one. This is a tough matchup. Like we saw what New England did to Nick Chubb last week, and the Bears are in New England, so it's possible that they just shut this offense down. But David Montgomery, like he comes through, man. Like in the matchups you don't think he's going to come through. Like he becomes an efficient running back, and I think he can end up getting it done. This is really a battle of the interior, offensive line for the Bears, and I think they can potentially get it done this week. I'm okay starting David Montgomery, considering who I have behind him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 23. Just hope he scores. Okay, that's going to be the motto for Clyde Edwards-Helaire every single week.
It could be this week because it could be because it's actually a decent matchup that could be a little bit higher scoring.
We talk about him to death on this podcast, and it's just about him scoring. If he doesn't score, he's going to give you 4 points.
Yeah, but that's what happened last week. We were forecasting the whole 5 weeks before he actually put up his first dud that it was going to happen, and now it has been 2 duds in a row.
Yeah.
So we kind of saw this coming.
Yeah. Tony Pollard at 24. I hope you sold. Tony Pollard at 24, getting a slight bump because of the Lions' rushing defense, giving up 5.5 yards per carry to running back. So I think Pollard is a decent flex this week. I have him here as a low end RB2, but you can play him. It's a good matchup, and he's been getting these chunk plays, getting these long runs, and this could be one of those games where it happens. Yeah,
Tony Pollard's a home run hitter, and against is it the league worst defense or one of the league worst run defenses? I could see him breaking a long run for a touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised. Ezekiel Elliott, I think, has a safer floor because the workload is there, but Tony Pollard is the Gabe Davis of running backs. So I think that there's a chance against a bad defense that he could do that. I'd have him as a flex play. I'd be happy with him as a flex this week.
I like it. I got Jamal Williams at 25. He can get some work in this one with DeAndre Swift coming back in his first game back. He's the Lions' primary goal line back either way. So with him, similar thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where he does get a little bit more work than Clyde Edwards-Helaire when DeAndre Swift is there. But you're kind of just hoping for a touchdown with him. And I think he has a higher chance than most running backs in this range to punch 1 or 2 in.
Yeah. 2.
Evidenced by what he's done this year.
Yeah, he has a better chance to punch 2 in, I think, than 1. That seems to be the case. He scored 2 or 0 touchdowns so far this season. I think he has a better chance to score 2 than maybe all the rest of the guys underneath him have to score 1. But that's just me. The thing with Jamal Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like we're talking about, it goes back to what we've been saying a couple of times on the podcast. Now all of a sudden it's, I hope he scores.
Yep.
He's going to score, I think. If they get down into the red zone, he becomes, the lead back. He's good for a touchdown, I think, in this matchup, especially if Dallas goes up. It could be garbage time touchdowns to go around.
I like it. Melvin Gordon, I have him at 26. He had a sit down with Nathaniel Hackett, apparently. He's going to start the game. They got to an understanding. But who knows how much work he gets, right? That's why he's down here. Maybe he starts, and then maybe Latavius Murray's still involved. Mike Boone's still involved.
Yeah.
This Broncos offense, like, can you trust them? They still don't look great. The Jets defense is playing well. Yeah. I'm still willing to flex him because maybe he does end up getting like 65% of the work. That would be great. And then that would end up moving him to like a RB2. But for now, he's outside the top 24.
Could be a token starting designation. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
I wouldn't trust it. We saw what happened last week. I don't like what happened at all last week for Melvin Gordon. Anybody who thought they had, a new nice fantasy asset with Javonte Williams going down and Melvin Gordon taking it up. Yeah, that's just rough. It's tough luck. I don't think Melvin Gordon I didn't think Melvin Gordon was that good anyway to begin with. I think since his days with the Chargers, he hasn't been very fantasy conducive. I'm not a big fan of Melvin Gordon fantasy. And last week was just, another reason not to start him for me.
I'm going to push back on that one. I think Melvin Gordon was a good running back last year. I thought he was good. And I understood, as good as Javonte Williams was, and me being a fantasy guy, like as much as I wanted to see Javonte get all the work, I understood why Melvin Gordon was still involved last year because he was pretty efficient still. Yards after contact was on point. He was solid in pass protection, and he was good, decent enough in the pass game, and good in short yardage situations. So like when I was looking at the numbers, like I didn't really have justification. Like how this year we're looking at Travis Etienne and James Robinson, and you're like, Travis Etienne's clearly the better back here. He should be getting more work. Like with Javonte, it's like, well, I get it. He's a rookie. They don't want to overuse him, and Melvin Gordon's good enough where you're like, all right, give him work. This year, I did not see that at all. This year was completely different. So I agree with you, like to an extent, where this year he hasn't been looking like a good running back. So I kind of understood why they benched him, but the way they did it was just like extremely weird.
Yeah, and that gives me no hope for the future. I don't want to trust him anymore until he goes 4 games with 65% work.
Right.
I don't want to trust it.
I have Najee Harris here at 27, Brian Robinson at 28, and then Kareem Hunt, and then James Robinson closing out the bottom 4 here, the top 30. So, any comments on any of these guys? Harris, Robinson, Kareem Hunt, or James Robinson before we close it out?
No, I think that's about it. Kareem Hunt, he could be due for a touchdown. He hasn't scored in the past, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. So maybe
he scored last week, didn't he? Or the week before? No, it was the week before.
Yeah,
he scored in week 5. Yeah,
could be due for a touchdown. Brian Robinson, I want to see how he does. In a game that isn't finishing 12-7. We'll see how that goes. And James Robinson, I'm not a big fan of James Robinson right now because he's taking away touches from Travis Etienne, but he should be a decent player. Like
you have personal issues. We have personal issues.
It's
with
personal.
James Robinson.
Yeah.
It's funny because like I talk so much shit about. I didn't talk shit about James Robinson. I was actually praising James Robinson for his return and how he's come back.
Oh yeah, I was too.
An extremely rough injury. No, this is my point though. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that like I was so adamant on trading him like after his first few games. I'm like, guys, please just trade him now because his production is not matching up with his utilization. And like I just feel like I was so hard on James Robinson in that situation. Where I'm just like, I just refused. Now it's like I don't even want to say anything negative about James Robinson anymore for the rest of the year. I just want to talk positively.
He'll take more touches. He will take more touches from Travis Etienne.
No, that's not what I want. That's not what I want.
The more you talk shit on him, the more he will produce.
Right. It's like inverse. Like I don't want that to happen. I'm not trying to jinx it. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to the podcast. If you can review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you could subscribing would mean the world to us. Like that really does a lot for us. That would mean the world if you could do that. If you're watching on YouTube and you like watching YouTube, please subscribe to the Upper Hand Fantasy channel here on YouTube. And I appreciate you guys. Make sure to check out Upper Hand. Make sure to check out Preciser. Thank you for sponsoring this video, Preciser. And we're going to sign out. We'll see you guys tomorrow at noon Eastern time. We're going to go over our wide receiver and tight end rankings. So we appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.